history and across the globe, different countries have always revered their toughest warriors. Today, our headlines are topped with a new breed of elite fighters. SEALs, Spetsnaz, SAS, Delta. They are some of the most well-known special operations forces of the world. The best of the best. They've proven their effectiveness time and time again. But with current world events, the necessity for other countries to have their own specialized elite units is greater than ever. Today, special operations forces exist in militaries all over the globe. Forces like the Norwegian FSK, rugged Arctic warriors tasked with protecting oil rigs from terrorist attacks. The famed British SAS, whom almost all other forces are modeled after. The Republic of Korea's UDT, trained by US Navy SEALs to protect their waters from the danger in the north. The well-respected Polish GROM, who've never lost one man in battle over hundreds of missions. US Delta Force and Navy SEALs, making history with recent wars in the Middle East. Russian Spetsnaz, masters of deception and bizarre training techniques. And the mysterious American OGA, providing crucial intel to operators in the field. Listen to the stories, see the high-tech weaponry, and witness the grueling training through the eyes of the actual international operators themselves. This is Global Warfighters. High-level targets, hostage rescue, counter-terrorism. There are certain types of operations that often fall outside the scope of conventional military forces.
A Tier 1 operator is someone who is talented, who's focused, who is operationally mature, who's tactically patient. And when you put that person in a group of like-minded operators, they become a very effective fighting force and one hell of a deterrent for the bad guys of the world.
Special forces play very, very important role in a whole political process in a world now.
We need special forces operations today because they're cost effective. If you can use small numbers of men effectively to strategically affect the operations of a foreign power or a terrorist organization, then it's a very good way of a country using its limited resources.
You truly have the best of the best. And what that allows a country to do is to have a so-called scalpel. You know, where your conventional forces serve more as a sledgehammer, you can go in and probe and basically set the stage for a conventional force to come in and change a war.
In the wake of major terrorist attacks and wars supported by the international community, the need for countries to develop their own special operations forces has grown. But before global terrorism originally became a major issue in the 1970s, very few had ever heard of special operations forces. It wasn't until 1980, when hostages were taken at the Iranian embassy in London, that an unknown Tier 1 unit took the world stage.
A group of Arabistani terrorists took over the Iranian embassy in London. They took 24 hostages. On the sixth day, the charge d'affaires, a man called Lavazani, was murdered by one of the terrorists, at which point control was handed over to the military. We approached the building silently. It didn't go quite as we'd hoped, and the assault approach phase was compromised. We were given a go, go, go early, and we attacked from 6 separate entry points. Me and my partner went in through the back door. There was gas, there was explosions, there was gunfire coming from upstairs, and hostages were coming down the stairs. Somebody shouted, "He's a terrorist," and looked up to see one of the terrorists coming down the stairs. None of us could open fire because there was a danger of shooting at the hostage or one of our own people. As he came clear at the bottom of the stairs, it was clear that he had a hand grenade in his hand. 3 of us shot him at the same time, and he collapsed in a ball. The building caught fire. There was smoke, there was noise, there was a lot of action, and when all the hostages were out, the troops came out, and finally, I was one of the last few individuals out of the building. During that 7 minutes, we killed 5 terrorists and captured 1, and we rescued 22 hostages.
And in that day, I live in Great Britain, I switch on Russian radio, and I try to hear you, see, so how they describe it. Among that special forces, Great Britain, there is no wounded, there is no dead. Everybody okay. It was a top, most beautiful operation in the history of special forces of the world.
The mission was played live on international television. It brought the Special Air Service into the public domain dramatically, and things were never going to be the same again after that.
It kind of set the stage for other Spec Ops forces. It showed the world what they were capable of, and it set the standard.
What the world had never known was that the Special Air Service, also known as the SAS, had already been around since World War II.
British Special Air Service was formed in the early 1940s in North Africa, essentially by David Stirling. He said, look, I can take a small number of men, I can raid, I can attack, I can parachute in. He was supported by Jock Lewis, who was the man who actually made things happen. They were looking for adventurers, for men that didn't quite fit the picture, who didn't fit well into the normal disciplined military arrangement.
Stirling, in short order in 1942, attacked 3 separate enemy airfields, destroyed over 60 aircraft with no losses to his raiding force.
By the end of the Second World War, there were several thousand Special Air Service soldiers operating right across Europe and carrying out raids behind enemy lines.
The SAS are made up of 4 Sabre squadrons: air, mountain, sea, and mobility. The squadrons are made up of patrols of 4 men, each specializing in either signals, demolition, medicine, or linguistics.
After the Iranian embassy siege, the whole world went out and paid the British government to have the Special Air Service train their people to carry out the roles that they now perceived as being absolutely needed and essential.
A great many countries, including the United States Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta, have modeled themselves on the British 2-2 SAS, Special Air Service.
To this day, the British SAS are still one of the busiest special forces in the world, including operations in the Middle East, Africa, and Northern Ireland.
There's only been 1 year since the Second World War where the British Army hasn't been involved in active operations somewhere in the world, and the Special Air Service since the 1950s has been involved in all of them.
Today, Special Operations Forces continue to help shape history around the world. As the British SAS made headlines before, the US Navy SEALs are currently the most talked about team around. SEALs can be deployed anywhere, but like their name implies, they specialize in operating around water. SEAL Team 6 made world headlines when they took out the most wanted man in the Western world, Osama bin Laden. But just like the SAS, the SEALs have been around for quite a while.
The Navy SEALs were born out of a speech JFK made in 1961. President Kennedy felt the need for a unit that could conduct unconventional warfare in a maritime environment.
I am directing the Secretary of Defense to expand rapidly and substantially, in cooperation with our allies, the orientation of existing forces for the conduct of non-nuclear war, paramilitary operations, and sublimited or unconventional wars.
The U.S. Navy SEALs' first success was in the Vietnam War as an unconventional warfare unit that wreaked havoc on the Viet Cong. They were known as the men with green faces because of the camouflage paint they used.
What makes the United States Navy SEALs unique is how cold, dark, deep, salt water sorts men out. And this is what makes their selection process so rigorous, so demanding, and produces so few graduates.
Not only do SEALs participate in standard special operations training, but they also have to learn to do it in, around, and over water. It's amazing just how comfortable these men can be in water, even in the most extreme situations.
Some of the toughest training I've had to go through as a Navy SEAL, of course, is the initial BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL training. That's roughly 6 months long. And probably the most famous week in there is called Hell Week, where we stay up for roughly 5 days straight.
The SEALs' affinity to water raised a few eyebrows when they were deployed to a war in the desert.
When SEALs first showed up at the beginning of the war in Afghanistan, we brought our high-speed assault craft, these boats. And some of the other forces looked at us like, why do you have boats in Afghanistan? Of course, we did have a reason. You know, we were counting on some follow-on missions maybe in the Horn of Africa. But we were relatively unproven on land, at least on a world stage. And we have certainly changed that over the last 11 or 12 years.
It was this proving ground that led to the decision to let the SEALs take on the most high-profile special operation in history, a mission that's now the subject of books and Hollywood movies, which has created some controversy in the SEAL community.
In regards to the bin Laden operation, As a community, we've agreed to kind of keep a lid on it out of respect for the operation itself and for future operations.
There are crucial missions that these men participate in every day that we'll never know of. But whether they want it or not now, the U.S. Navy SEALs are forever part of world history.
It gave the USA a chance to hold its head high and say, we were going to do this. And wherever you go and wherever you hide, eventually we'll find you. And they managed to do that, and they proved it. It was very important for the morale of the Western world.
When a Special Forces operator goes into the field, the physical tools he brings can be just as important as the intel he has to work with. The weapons have changed and developed over the years, but one fact remains true. You need the right tool for the right job. A large percentage of what Special Operations Forces do is counter-terrorism. Ideally, that means preventing acts of terrorism, but it also means stopping acts in progress. One of the most difficult missions for a Tier 1 unit to handle is a hostage rescue. When innocent people's lives are at stake, the training needed is ramped exponentially. In 2011, a ship and crew operated by South Korea was hijacked by pirates, and the Koreans showed the world just how hard they had been training. The Republic of Korea UDT, or Korean Navy SEALs, are heavily modeled after and often trained with their US SEAL brothers. With a constant threat looming at their border to the north, the UDT have good reason to always stay sharp. North Korean agents are a constant threat and have been known to use what are called midget submarines to infiltrate South Korean waters.
The South Korean UDT are a unique bunch. They actually send guys through our pipeline, through our training, and take some of that knowledge back to their own units.
An operation that indicates the capability of the Republic of Korea Navy SEALs is the Samho Jewelry operation in 2011.
There's been a dramatic rescue on board a hijacked freighter in the Arabian Sea. The early morning raid had been carried out with a South Korean destroyer and a Lynx helicopter providing covering fire.
The ship and her 21 crew members were taken out into international waters while it's believed the pirates waited for backup or their ransom to be met. South Korea had to act.
An operation such as the one the UDT, or the South Korean UDT SEALs carried out, is very complex. It requires intel, it requires assumed risk, it requires execution on a nearly perfect level.
Just before dawn on January 21st, the UDT saw their opportunity and made their move. Using small, fast boats, the Korean team hit the freighter like a typhoon.
For the ROK Navy SEALs, to fight the pirates and rescue the hostages is like fighting through a 15-story building that's made of steel with steel doors laid on its side. They would be fighting from compartment to compartment, having to work their way, cut their way, blast their way through the doors as the pirates tried to hold off their attackers.
If you can imagine taking down a target which you've never been before, you don't know where the bad guys are, and you're clearing this systematically, leaning on the training that you've done in the past and relying on your teammates to watch your back, it's a very complex operation, and there's a great deal of risk involved.
The 5-hour siege ended with the killing of 8 pirates, capturing of 5 more, and the freeing of all 21 crew members. 3 UDT operators were injured in the op, but in the end, they all survived.
The Korean UDT SEALs are a highly seasoned, effective unit. They've proven time and time again to be effective at deterring and handling some of these relatively volatile situations that pop up.
Whether it's hostage rescue or taking out a high-priority target, the best way to successfully carry out a mission is by any means necessary.
Essentially, through unconventional warfare, you're trying not to have a fair fight. You're trying to stack all the odds in your favor. Delta Force is also a component of JSOC, the Joint Special Operations Command.
Where the U.S. SEALs represent the Navy, Delta's primary function is counter-terrorism and direct action missions such as hostage rescues.
A typical hostage rescue operation that Delta participated in during the Iraq War occurred in 2004 in Ramadi. 5 contractors, foreigners, had been captured by the insurgent forces, who executed one of them. But exactly where they were kept and who was keeping them and how many people were guarding them was initially unknown.
Most Tier 1 groups are heavily trained for hostage rescue. It's all about knowing your specific job, trusting your team, and practice. Lots and lots of practice. With excellent intel provided by Polish forces, the hostages' location was pinpointed to a remote house, and Delta sent out on their daring mission.
Once the hostages' location was fixed, Delta, with support of its organic aviation unit, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, would have conducted a templated hostage rescue operation.
Delta came in by Black Hawk, fast and furious. By flying low to the ground, the thundering blades of the copters wouldn't be heard until they were right on top of their target. With seconds to prevent the loss of lives, Delta stormed the house from all directions.
If you had been on the raid, you would have fought your way into the building, clearing each room, employing all your training and target discrimination to ensure that you kill the insurgents, but you don't kill the hostages, but making sure that you treated them as if they might still be a threat in case any of the insurgents were playing hostage in order to escape the attack.
Once on the ground, the entire mission was over in a matter of minutes. The 4 remaining hostages were rescued, and the kidnappers had no idea what hit them. Thanks to specific training that only Tier 1 units experience, Delta was able to do their job with sharp precision. One of the lesser-known special operations forces in the world is the Canadian JTF-2.
Canadian Task Force 2 teams are a secretive organisation, particularly counter-terrorist. They're there for the defence of Canadian government, to be used very much as in a counter-terrorist role.
The recent rush to valuable natural resources in the north has given Canada a reason to discourage troublemakers from crossing their borders. No one wants a run-in with a highly trained JTF-2 Arctic unit.
The JTF-2 was responsible for providing security for the Vancouver Olympics. You know, Olympics are watched around the world. They're a high-stakes event where a country can't afford to have something go wrong. The terrorist activity in the 1972 Munich Games set the stage for Tier 1 Spec Ops forces to be a part of future Olympic events.
Canada has gone to great lengths to keep the JTF-2 out of the public eye. Secrecy is extremely important to all special operations forces, and a reason for some operators to remain anonymous. When it comes to modern weapons, perhaps no gun has changed the way wars are fought on the ground than the sniper rifle.
Just the fact that the enemy know we have snipers out there is a deterrent, will oftentimes make them take different routes or not conduct an operation altogether.
The basic element that separates a special operator from a conventional soldier is the type of Special operations forces exist in militaries all over the globe. Forces like the Norwegian FSK, rugged Arctic warriors tasked with protecting oil rigs from terrorist attacks. The famed British SAS, whom almost all other forces are modeled after. The Republic of Korea's UDT, trained by US Navy SEALs to protect their waters from the danger in the north. The well-respected Polish GROM, who've never lost one man in battle over hundreds of missions. US Delta Force and Navy SEALs, making history with recent wars in the Middle East. Russian Spetsnaz, masters of deception and bizarre. Throughout history and across the globe, different countries have always revered their toughest warriors. Today, our headlines are topped with a new breed of elite fighters. SEALs, Spetsnaz, SAS, Delta. They are some of the most well-known special operations forces of the world. The best of the best. They've proven their effectiveness time and time again. But with current world events, the necessity for other countries to have their own specialized elite units is greater than ever. Today,
Foreign power or a terrorist organization, then it's a very good way of a country using its limited resources.
You truly have the best of the best. And what that allows a country to do is to have a so-called scalpel. You know, where your conventional forces serve more as a sledgehammer, you can go in and probe and basically set the stage for a conventional force to come in and change a war.
In the wake of major terrorist attacks and wars supported by the international community, the need for countries to develop their own special operations forces has grown. But before global terrorism originally became a major issue in the 1970s,
Who is talented, who's focused, who is operationally mature, who's tactically patient. And when you put that person in a group of like-minded operators, they become a very effective fighting force and one hell of a deterrent for the bad guys of the world.
Special forces play very, very important role in a whole political process in the world now.
We need special forces operations today because they're cost effective. If you can use small numbers of men effectively to strategically affect the operations of a foreign...
our training techniques, and the mysterious American OGA, providing crucial intel to operators in the field. Listen to the stories, see the high-tech weaponry, and witness the grueling training through the eyes of the actual international operators themselves. This is Global Warfighters. High-level targets, hostage rescue, counter-terrorism. There are certain types of operations that often fall outside the scope of conventional military forces.
A Tier 1 operator is someone